Vedika Bahl joins me on set. Good to see you, Vedika.
Hi, Yinka.
Hi. So, to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence against Women, Vedika, let's talk about the rise in misogynistic propaganda online. What are some of the main arguments, and do they hold up against scientific figures?
Well, Yinka, the answer is no. Whilst most misogynistic rhetoric claims to be rooted in statistics and science, there's often skewed figures or incomplete narratives, and this means that these arguments often don't hold up when they are faced with the facts. Now, with that in mind, let's go through now the rise in masculinist propaganda. Masculinism is a group of movements, essentially, that asserts that men are victims of a society that's dominated by women. There are different branches, but essentially the idea is that there is a crisis of masculinity, and men should no longer be victims of feminism and what feminism has brought women in society. Now, this essentially promotes misogynistic rhetoric. Now, this brings me nicely onto one of my main claims within masculinist discourse, is that this idea that feminism has gone too far and in fact brought women more advantages than it has to men by way of protective laws, measures and quotas that put men at a disadvantage. However, according to the latest gender index report by Equal Measures 2030, a coalition of national, regional and global leaders from feminist networks, civilians and international development, their latest gender index found that over 3 billion women and girls still live in countries with poor or very poor levels of gender inequality. Also, here in France at least, there is still a gender pay gap, and women are still earning less than men for the same job. According to INSEE, figures show that women's average wage income was 22.2% lower than men's on average, and this is often due to women having to work part-time or take career breaks due to the burden of raising children. Women also bear the majority of the weight of unpaid domestic or care work, and women are less present in positions in financial and economic decision-making positions. So I think what masculinists need to remember here is that any privileges women have gained that have put them in a better position in society, any legislation or quotas, for example, these are all attempts to correct an imbalance that was already prevalent and present in society. It's not an attempt to push women ahead. So we can definitely mark that claim as false.
And Vedika, obviously today is dedicated to raising awareness of violence women face, but there's rhetoric online that dismisses this violence. Tell us more.
That's right, Yinka. Discourse in masculinist circles often claims that women lie about gender-based violence in order to destroy men's lives. Essentially, the idea is that accusations of rape, sexual assault, domestic violence, these are ways that women can destroy a man's reputation, his career, or seek attention. Those are the kinds of things that I'm seeing, at least on social media, in these circles. Now, in practice, though, most studies agree that false allegations of rape by women are very, very rare. According to a 2019 report by the French Senate, only around 3 to 5% of rape or sexual assault charges have been classified as false or misleading. And across the pond, Channel 4, British Channel 4's fact-checking service found that in the UK, men are 230 times more likely to be raped than to be falsely accused of rape. So we can see how the data is showing otherwise from what we saw in our claim. Now, there's also the fact that a massive percentage of violence against women is never actually reported. The French Justice Ministry estimates that 4 out of 5 women never actually come forward. And we also need to remember that just because a man isn't convicted for a crime, it does not necessarily mean he's innocent, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that the woman accusing him is lying. And there are many reasons overall, Yinka, why a prosecution may not be successful.
And Vedika, there's also the masculinist argument that men experience the same rate of domestic violence as women. Is that correct?
Yes, that is another argument in these circles. They present domestic violence as reciprocal. They say that only pointing the finger at men for domestic violence is misandry, in other words, prejudice against men. But a landmark report from the WHO has found that nearly 1 in 3 women, so that's estimated 840 million globally, have experienced partner or sexual violence during their lifetime. Now, within the EU, these figures show at around 17.7% across the bloc. And in France, 84% of domestic violence victims are women. So we can see how men are clearly in a minority here and women are the majority. We've also got links and studies given by Women's Aid pointing out that men don't experience necessarily domestic abuse as part of embedded structural inequalities against their sex, and they're much more likely to experience repeated victimization and to be seriously hurt. Now, all of this, we have to finish with this. All of this does not invalidate the very real suffering and the very real experience of domestic violence against men and the suffering that they face in that. But it's clear that this is not reciprocal as they claim, and we need to remember that women are clearly, they remain the main victims in this case.
Vedika, thank you so much for that breakdown. Vedika Bahl there with our daily Truth or Fake segment.